all the little adjustments. Shabbat Shalom. On the one hand, is pretty much the most common way to begin a discussion in Judaism, because it implies that if there's one hand, there is also another hand. Anybody who's ever seen Fiddler on the Roof knows that on the one hand is a running trope throughout that entire play or movie. Anybody who's ever studied Judaism seriously and taken a look at any of our sacred texts that are opened up to the pages with commentary will know that the text is ringed by different opinions, different discussions, lots of different hands. It is one of the things that has enabled our people to remain so intellectually flexible as well as inquisitive, because we have never settled for just having one hand and only one hand. But there is a point where we draw a line. There is a point where the other hand is no hand that deserves to be part of this conversation. Some of you may have been paying attention to the various tidbits of news over this last week, and there was a recording of a Texas teacher that explained that in compliance with new Texas legislation, if you are teaching about the Holocaust, on one hand, you teach about the horrors and terrors and all of the suffering that went on, but on the other hand, you also have to offer opposing views. To which, to the credit, the teachers who were listening to this presentation nervously laughed and said, but what are the opposite views? What are we supposed to teach in contrast to the opinion of the Holocaust as being one, if not the greatest horrors ever perpetrated upon the face of the earth? What is the opposing hand that deserves any time within a classroom setting? The presenter did not elaborate. But we know what the answer is. And it seems that in hindsight, it doesn't seem like that particular presenter was advocating for this, but we know others who have, some much closer to home than others. In 2018, a Florida principal was fired twice because he refused to say that the Holocaust was a factual event. That because it was a debated topic, he could not compel teachers to teach only one way and could not stifle the debate that surrounded this incident. That was not considered quite good enough, and they had to reinstate him the first time, but then they decided no, they didn't want him, and they got rid of him a second time. It was quite an ordeal back in the day. Only 2018, but it does seem like a long, long time ago. But why? Why must we teach the opposing view? What is it that we are trying to prevent in the ideas behind making sure there is room for all of these opinions? Well, interestingly enough, in the Texas case, we have a very clear legislative goal, which is that nobody should feel guilty. No student in the classroom should be made to feel guilty for the crimes of their ancestors. And therefore, you don't want to only give one view, which might make somebody uncomfortable because, their grandparents murdered millions of people, and we wouldn't want them to feel ashamed of that. Having met a German, only a few in my life, but one that I got to know quite well, I can say the Germans are not ashamed to feel ashamed. The Germans are not embarrassed to feel guilty. When I was in England as an undergraduate student, I was in the international dorm, as my study abroad put me, and one of the other students there was from Germany, studying in England. And one night, quite suddenly out of the blue, he said, "I'm sorry." I'm like, what, did you take something from the shared fridge that was mine? And he began to apologize for the Holocaust. This was a 20-year-old. He wasn't even born when the Holocaust took place, let alone have been of an age where he could have been held responsible or culpable. Even his parents would have been very unlikely to have been born or of age during the Holocaust itself. But he felt a national need, a personal need on behalf of his nation, to apologize for what had been done, for the crimes that were against humanity and against our people. It was a very unexpected moment, but a very powerful one. that he had no problem saying that he was sorry. And it was clearly important to him to feel the need to unburden what he felt had been the crimes of his nation, so that he could move forward and away from the direction of the errors of his past, the past of his nation. But why is it that there are others who wish to deny the Holocaust? What is it that they seek to gain by saying the Holocaust didn't happen, or wasn't so bad, or is overblown, or, well, you know, there were other good things that shouldn't be taken into account? What is the possible motivation for denying the Holocaust? It's like trying to deny that there was a hurricane. What are you accomplishing? Well, you are accomplishing removing sympathy for the Jews. Pure and simple, Holocaust denialism is built in anti-Semitism. It is not because some well-reasoned researcher sat down and did all of the math and looked through all of the records, which the Nazis kept very careful record of, and came to the conclusion that in fact the Holocaust didn't happen. It is, well, you know, the Jews are making an awful lot of hay out of this whole Holocaust thing. They're really milking it for their benefit. Let's say that it didn't happen, and then people won't be quite so compassionate, sympathetic, and supportive of them, because we all know how compassionate, sympathetic, and supportive people are towards the Jews on a daily basis. But then that actually forces us to ask the deeper question. Why would they want to be anti-Semitic in the first place? What is the possible motivation for the anti-Semitism? What gain is there to take this tiny fraction of the world's population and turn them into an object of obsessive hatred? What possibly motivates not only contemporary but throughout history anti-Semites of cultures that are as diverse as the world can produce to not like us? Well, on the one hand, we have fairly much what God says to Abraham. You know, God predicts this to Abraham. We didn't read it out loud, but it is in Parashat Lecha at the very, very beginning when God says, go to a land that I will show you. What is one of the things that God promises Abraham? Not only I'll make you a great nation, but I will bless those who bless you. And I will, what's the rest of the verse? And I will curse those who curse you. And in fact, historically, we have seen this to be true. Nations that treat Jews well, and by well I mean, you know, equal citizenry, not like put us on pedestals, but just don't put us in train cars, that nations that treat us well, just as decent human beings, do well. Historically, when you look through the record, the different high points of most nations have been when they were treating the Jews best. What was the golden age of Spain? Well, when it wasn't Spain, but it was instead part of the Muslim Empire, and it was specifically during the time when the Muslim Empire was being the most generous to the Jewish people in its territories. When did Spain begin to decline? You can pretty much nail it to the Spanish Inquisition. In 1492, with the expulsion, Spain begins its long decline despite the great resources of the colonies that they have begun to exploit in the Americas. Despite the mountains of gold that are pouring into their country, Spain fades from being a major force over the next couple centuries as the Jewish population is persecuted further and further. And where did many of those Jews go? They went to the areas that are now called the Netherlands. Guess what happens to the Netherlands during that period? Their fortunes begin to rise. Their fortunes begin to increase. Over time, again and again and again, places that welcome Jews in do well, and places that treat Jews badly do badly. It's almost like God knew something when he made this statement to Abraham. It's almost like it works. But how can we still explain the impulse to curse us with all of this evidence, with all of this track record of if you treat the Jews well, your country does well, and if you treat your Jews badly, your country does badly? How can people continue to persist in wanting to treat us badly, in wanting to hate us? It is because that we have become a blank slate upon which they can project their hate, obsessions, and fear. Let me give you a quick example. If you were living during the revolutions of communism, if you were living within a communist country, who were the Jews? They were the bankers, the financiers, the loan sharks, the capitalist pigs, the bourgeoisie traitors. That was the Jews. Why? Because the communist revolution was afraid of those people. And the Jews became the stand-in for those people. At the same time, if you lived in one of the capitalist countries, who were the Jews? They were the communists. They were the subversive socialists undermining the establishment and order, trying to bring down the country from within. The only thing that both the capitalist and communist countries could agree on, apart from fighting Hitler, was that neither liked the Jews. That was one thing that, in fact, all three agreed upon. If you are a racist, who are the Jews? They are a filthy, poor blood, mingling, mongrel source of denigration to the human genome, a terrible blight upon the face of the earth. Right? The lowest of the lowest caste within the blood hierarchy that the racists have. And if you are an anti-racist, who are the Jews? They are the oppressors. They are the racists. They are the slave owners. They are the people who hold down. They are the slumlords. They are the people that have squeezed the life from the different races of the world for their own gain. They can't both be true. And yet both sides, which agree on nothing else, agree the Jew is the problem. So if we are this blank slate, this perfect protean template upon which you can project the boogeyman of your choice, we then have to ask the question, why? Why are we the perfect mannequin that they can dress up in the costume of their fears? And there are a few answers, fairly straightforward. One, they don't know anything about us. We're an enigma. We are a mystery to them. And because we are a mystery to them, they don't have to worry that what they say will contradict what they know. It is the very easiest, the best thing ever to be confident about what you are ignorant of. Because you don't have to worry about facts and knowledge getting in the way of what you proclaim. So because I am completely ignorant about the far side of the moon, I can tell you all sorts of things that I know to be true about it. Because they are completely ignorant about the Jew, they can say whatever they wish, and more importantly, they know their audience knows just as little, and the audience will not be able to contradict it. Two, when they do begin to learn a little something about us, we're a little weird. You know, we're kind of the weird kid in school. We don't exactly do the things that they do in every way. Yeah, sure, we eat, but we eat funny. Sure, we also pray to God, but we pray funny. Sure, we have rules about a moral life, but it seems like ours might be a little different. And weirdness is not usually celebrated. Despite our love of individuality in this country, or at least our protestations that we love individuality, generally weirdness needs to be the right kind of weirdness, the acceptable kind of weirdness, the sane kind of weirdness that we have already approved of, and we were just a little off normal within most of these other cultures. Third, we were weak. We were weak. Right? There are a tiny number of Jews in the world. A tiny number of Jews. And yes, we have survived, but we have not survived because there are a billion of us. We have survived despite there only being a handful of us in proportion to the world population at any time. And when somebody is weak, they are a much, much more inviting target. After all, are you going to try and project your fears and hate onto somebody that will be able to beat you up? No, nobody would do that. You project your fears onto the target that you are confident that you can deal with and thrash in order to show your strength. And for most of our history, those who chose to hate us had the power to easily do with us as they wished. But fourth, the stick in the craw that really drives home part of the the racism, anti-Semitism, and hatred that it makes them want to project upon us, we haven't gone away. Despite our weakness, despite our weirdness, despite the enigma that we are, and despite all of the centuries and millennia of hate and attack and destruction, we're still around. And let's be honest, that is bizarre and kind of scary. You may know that they're making another Halloween movie, you know, where Jason comes out, or another Freddy Krueger movie, or another horror movies. And it always, these zombie movies, horror movies, every time you think you've defeated the enemy, what happens? It comes back again, right? Everybody gets quiet, and then it lurches back into the frame of view. And to be honest, to much of the world, we seem to be the zombie nation. We keep popping up again after they think they have ground us into the dust. And that kind of scares them, because it means there's sort of something working to our advantage. Now, they can't actually just admit that what's working to our advantage is 3,000 years of survival training and learning how to deal with these types of catastrophes and having a resiliency of spirit and tradition that allows us to overcome the different crises that are thrown at us. So instead, the explanation has to be nefarious. There is a cabal. There is secret organizations. The Jews are manipulating things. Or maybe those catastrophes weren't as bad as they claimed them to be. Maybe there is another hand to the Holocaust. Maybe it wasn't such a total wipeout. Maybe they've been lying about that while secretly building up their power. Because you know, that's what the Jews do. It is insidious. And it is something that we will never see the end of until the world finally recognizes righteousness in all of its forms, in all of its places. But in some ways it is also comforting. Not because we have to wake up to news stories about people saying that there's another side to the Holocaust, but it's comforting because what God promised Abraham continues to be true. And if the negative side of what Abraham was promised was true, then the positive side is true as well. If God was correct in telling Abraham there are going to be these people out there that will hate you, and they will hate you despite the blessings that you and your descendants can bring to them, they will still hate you, then we have to also accept the first half of the verse. And there will be others that bless you, and you will be a blessing to them. And indeed, this is one of the high points of the blessing that we have received. I know that there are more stories than ever about how Jews are being left out by all sides of the political spectrum and all sides of the different people fighting for the rights of others, and that in all of those groups, the Jews don't seem to count. But if we are honest in appraising our status in the world today, we are doing better than we have done at any time in the past, both nationally and globally. No, we're not safe. No, it's not done. No, the haters have not been swept from the face of history and gone only into the history books. It's still there. But so are we. Better and stronger than ever, not because of our nefarious plots, not because we have some secret power, not because we have a base on the dark side of the moon that is shooting lasers to help guide our people to victory, but because we are still a nation bound together, a nation bound by the ideas of justice and kindness that God gave to Abraham, and a nation that will never, ever see that other hand. A nation that will always walk in the right path. And with that, we will continue, despite what they say. Shabbat Shalom.